April 11th, 2018 morning session of the Portland City Council. Carla, could you please call the roll?
Fish.
Here.
Saltzman. Udaly.
Here.
Fritz.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here. Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to the Portland City Council. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during City Council meetings so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak on any subject. You may also sign up for a public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, a yellow light goes on. When your time is done, a red light goes on. If you are in the audience and you would like to show your support for something that is said, please feel free to do a thumbs up. If you want to express that you do not support something, please feel free to do a thumbs down. Disruptive conduct, such as shouting or interrupting testimony or council deliberations, will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Thank you for helping your fellow Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe.
Thank you. All right, let's start with communications. First individual, excuse me, this is a disruption in violation of council policy.
Can we have an emergency session talking about the executions of our police force?
You're just being disruptive. I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
Social services that we all need in this city. We need social services. We don't need more cops. You know that. You can tell your
Zero.
3:30, request of Norm Santana to address council regarding a municipal broadband district in Portland.
Is Norm here today? I do not see Mr. Santana. Next individual, please.
3:31, request of Michael O'Callahan to address council regarding council treatment of humans.
Mr. Callahan, good morning and welcome.
Thank you. My name is Michael Callahan. First thing I'd like to offer everybody here and on television the opportunity to make the earth a better place. Pick up a piece of litter. Okay, we can all do it. It's everywhere. Okay, first. Second, friend of mine Facebooked me Jay Hammond's show. He was ex-governor of Alaska that he did on me in the mid-'80s. Number 5. If you want to find out a little bit about my history, go there, check it out. It's really pretty fun. Me, like in my 30s. Anyway, so I like to do the fun things first. Mayor, you've supported the law prohibiting the discard of past pull date food. Nathan was your point man on it, so need another point man? Should I just call your office later on? And
that would be great.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you.
Okay, take care of that. Now, this other is a little heavy. As you know, I get into this kind of stuff because I slept out last night, okay? And this is directly to you for the police and to you, Amanda, for the Park Service, okay? When we are solving problems, we all know this. You define the problem as clearly as you can. You apply a manipulative to produce an outcome. This question is directly to you, Mr. Wheeler. What is the desired outcome of the sweeps?
I will answer when you're done with your time. You finish your time, and then I will respond to that.
Well, I know what happens because of the sweeps. with the sweep last year, Spring Water Trail Corridor, my next door neighbor died. The average age of people dying on the streets in Portland is 46 years. Same thing in Vancouver, British Columbia, same age in San Francisco. This is economic genocide. Okay? This is here's the definition of genocide on the UN. Conditions of life may include deliberate deprivation of resources indispensable for survival, such as food, medical services, or systemic expulsion from homes. Okay? You are not killing people. Hitler didn't go around shooting people. You are creating an atmosphere that causes the death of your subjects. I find that behavior inappropriate, but I understand that you're just carrying on past policies. You really haven't examined these policies. Please examine this policy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So I will respond. First of all, we invest heavily, and as I will say in my speech tomorrow, record amounts in homeless prevention. Last year, the city and the county combined kept 6,500 people off the streets through intervention services. We invested heavily in additional shelter space because I and many others in this community do not think it is humane to let people sleep outside in the snow and the rain. We want to give them access to water, to bathrooms, to laundry facilities, and most importantly, connect them with whatever services they need to get off and stay off the streets. We made record investments last year in housing, and lower income housing, I will say tomorrow, and I will show the facts on the screen behind me, we actually delivered record affordable housing last year, and we're on track this year to do it again. With regard to sweeps specifically, it is a very rare circumstance during my administration where we actually move somebody out of a campsite. We have a priority list based on either environmental issues, public health issues, or public safety issues. We always, and we have a legal agreement that requires this, but I also happen to think it's the right thing to do, we intervene with social service providers well in advance, because we post in advance, and we send people in to try to get people better accommodations. And the vast, vast majority, I think virtually everybody, accepts that offer as a viable and desirable opportunity. We don't just simply randomly go around the city shaking people down or moving them out. That is not the current policy, and I don't believe that has ever been the policy during my administration. So that is the best answer I can give you, and I appreciate seeing you today as always.
May I respond?
No, you've had your 3 minutes, and there's a lot of people waiting. You made your point very clear, though. I heard it. I'm going to respond.
There are 12,000 people on the streets, and I appreciate the efforts that you're making.
Thank you.
They're woefully inadequate.
I don't disagree that there is a
Hope Village got swept. Okay, so
there are 60,000 homeless people in LA, and they're investing $1.5 billion. I didn't say the problem's solved. It is a growing and very serious problem. It is a humanitarian crisis. But what I want you to know is we are doing our part to address it, and we're doing so very well, in my opinion. Thank you, sir. Next individual, please.
Item 332, a request of Joanne Harrigal to address council regarding Elders in Action Civics 101 training.
Good morning.
Mayor and members of the council, my name is Joanne Harrigal. I'm the Deputy Director at Elders in Action. I'm here today to thank you for your support for and participation in the Civics 101 training that Elders in Action conducted in January and February of this year. The training series consisted of 5 sessions and attracted over 35 participants from across the county. A few of them are with me today. We focused on the basic operation and structure of city, county, neighborhood, and state governments. We visited and learned about both the city of Portland and the city of Gresham and compared the government structures of the two. In the city of Gresham, we met with the mayor and a city councilor, and in Portland, we met with staff from Commissioner Udaley's office and staff from the Bureau of Transportation. We met with County Commissioner Vega Peterson and toured the county offices and the hearing room. And we met with ONI and East Portland neighborhood staff and neighborhood leaders from the city of Gresham. Finally, we took 20 people to the Capitol in Salem to tour the building, meet our legislators, and hear from the governor's human services staff. A few weeks after the session ended, a few participants joined me here at City Council to see the council in action. Among other things, we learned how to sign up to give testimony, where to sit, places not to sit, and then also firsthand how to see the timer go from green to yellow to red. Participants reflected after the series was over that it helped demystify the government structures and processes and left participants feeling empowered to participate in advocacy from a place of knowledge. Thank you to you and Commissioner Udaley for her office's participation, and thank you all for allowing me to show people how this city works up close and personal. We appreciate your long-term support, and we feel that Civics 101 is a great example of how we can all work together. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you, and I'll speak on behalf of all of us, I'm sure. We really appreciate the work that Elders in Action does in the community, and I think the Civics 101 training is just one more example of how you are being a very effective partner in helping us be an age-friendly city for everyone. And I'm not going to get ahead of the council in the budget process, but I can tell you there's a lot more to come.
Great.
And I want to thank you all for your active participation in helping us realize the vision of an age-friendly community. Thanks for being here today. Next individual, please.
Item 333, request of injured and pissed off to address council regarding wasting taxpayer dollars, 2 publications of city council meetings.
No, go. I was going to help, but I'm not helping.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning. My name's Injured and Pissed Off. And of course, I've addressed this issue before with the 2 publications. Joe Walsh, of all things, came to your defense, Mr. Mayor, and he said that the Daily Journal of Commerce, printing the Portland City Council, is doing that for free. And I was in disbelief when he said that, but I guess maybe he's getting a little old.
Aren't we all?
Well, your excuse was, Mr. Mayor, saying that the 2 publications that some people don't have internet. I think that equally applies even to the mayor getting old.
Yes, sir.
Now the DJs, or the Portland Tribune, is only publishing the City Hall, the City Council record in their business section of the Tribune, and it's only printed in separate, it's a separate storage container. They used to put it in Tuesdays and Thursdays paper, and now they should be printing a lot less papers. Maybe the city's getting a discount for that. They should be if they're not getting it. After all, that is the taxpayers' money, technically. So I hope that it doesn't cut into the newspaper's profits too much, but there still is 2 publications that's being published. It seems to be absurd with the internet. you saying that some people don't have it, but the meeting's also on there as well. And next time when I speak here, request of injured and pissed off, this is for May 23rd of this year, injured and pissed off to address council regarding civil conspiracy and conflict of interest in 7 service animal attacks in less than 6 years by the same dog. I'll be addressing that the May 23rd. 2/3 of the nation has a dog or cat, but have they been attacked 7 times? Just because I live on the city property, the Hamilton West Apartments is owned by the city of Portland, and they allowed that 7 dog attacks to happen to me, and of course I got injured severely. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your being here. Next individual, please, Carla.
334, request of Gloria Negazaho to address council regarding community forum on participatory budgeting.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right, get comfortable here. My name is Gloria Negazaho. I'm here to draw your attention to and invite you to a community forum that we have on participatory budgeting. Something that is, it's a concept that was introduced to me that I think is really an interesting concept and an important one as it relates to democracy and participation into resource allocations by citizens of this great city. And so I'd like to invite you to attend the community forum that we have this Saturday from 9 in the morning to 3:30. We've got information on healthydemocracy.org. That's where registration is at. As of this morning, we have about 115 people that have already registered. And so just would like to encourage you and your staff to register and to participate. The goal of it is really, we're just trying to bring participatory budgeting into the Portland metro area. And what we're trying to do is just connect communities with elected officials and staff to start just discussing what that looks like in practice and how important it is, and if that's something that the people of the city of Portland would like to be part of or to bring to the city. Again, because it's important that people are part of the decision-making process where it's not just a budget, here you go, and we're going to tell you how to where the council basically decide on everything budget. But with participatory budgeting, what you're doing is inviting citizens to decide where and how they want to allocate resources. It doesn't have to be everything, but you set aside an amount of money and you let them decide on that. And I think that's really great again. So Mayor Wheeler, I think during your campaign, you promised to bring PB to Portland. And would like to kind of like ask if you would like to give a shout out in your State of the City address about the forum. That would be really great. And also would like to ask if there's an opportunity for us to meet with either one of you to talk further about participatory budgeting. Again, the point is to make sure that people are participating in resource allocation in the city of Portland, because that's really important. It's empowering. It gives people voices to participate into our own tax dollars. So thank you so much for having me this morning.
Thank you, Gloria. And before you leave, could if people in the community are interested in attending, could you give the website URL one more time, please?
Sure. It's www.healthydemocracy.org.
And Gloria, I know I cannot attend on Saturday, and I apologize for that. I am, however, very interested in what results from that conversation, and I would love to have the opportunity to chat with you about that after the fact. I will definitely put this out on my social media. If you could be kind enough, so you see Michelle waving right there. If you can give her the information, we'll put it out.
Sounds great.
We'll put it out broadly. Commissioner Fritz.
I have the grand reopening of Ventura Park on Saturday, so I also cannot come, but I'll have staff there. So thank you very much for being here to publicize it.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. And that gets us to the consent agenda. Have any items been pulled from the consent agenda?
Yes, 337.
337, please call the roll on the remainder.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaly.
I have a couple comments to make. I'm generally supportive of putting our reappointments on the consent agenda, but since we have our reappointee in the audience today, Mr. Stanley, I just want to thank him for his over 30 years of service to the city of Portland. He's been a driving force in helping the city draft our city noise code, and which has stood the test of time in court appeals and challenges to the good work of one of our nation's leading agencies for addressing the growing issue of urban noise pollution. He has contributed probably thousands of hours for free to the city. Mary Sipes is a fan, clearly, and he's a state of Oregon licensed acoustical engineer who can be found grading the state engineering exams for new acoustical engineers. That sounds thrilling, Mr. Stanley. Thank you. He's past president of the National Council of Acoustical Consultants and is active with the Acoustical Society of America, an institute of noise control engineering. We are privileged to have a national expert help serve our community. Thank you and congratulations on your reappointment, Mr. Stanley. Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The consent agenda is adopted. Mr. Stanley, since you made the effort to be here, did you want to come up and say a few words? I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you'd like, we'd certainly love to hear from you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome, and thank you for inviting me back. I would like to say that I look forward to another 3 years on the board. As Commissioner Udaly was mentioning, I have been on the board for quite some time, and then I took a period off, back on the board now. So well, I look forward to seeing if we can make some improvements in North Portland, the whole city, you know, in terms of some of the issues that have come up with noise. So I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you. We really appreciate your service.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next item, time certain, number 335, please.
Report on recent work of the city auditor, recreation scholarships, street improvement projects, police gang enforcement team.
Colleagues, last year I clearly stated my position in opposition to the gang enforcement list. I was asked if it would continue to exist or be replaced by some other list, and I was assured that it would not. I was deeply disappointed by what the auditor's report revealed. I have serious questions about the list, about how it is used, how it is managed, and what policies govern the list. Those were all key questions raised by the audit report. A key question is whether the existence of the list is in conflict with my direct direction. Chief Outlaw and I share the same concerns, and last week she directed the Bureau to immediately cease use of the list until a further evaluation could be conducted. I want to be very clear. I support Chief Outlaw's decision.
Not to hold an emergency session.
Excuse
when
me.
there's a murder.
Excuse me, Mr. Walsh, this is a violation of council policy.
You are a disgrace.
You'll have to leave, sir.
He throws me out, not you. Throw me out.
You have to leave.
Throw me out there, Mayor.
Come on, Mr. Walsh. Out.
Say the word, then I'll leave.
Mr. Walsh.
Mr. Walsh, please leave.
Say the word, then I'll leave.
Leave, Mr. Walsh.
Say the words. Don't be afraid, you Republican. Get away from me.
Wow, that's the third death threat I've had this week. So I support Chief Outlaw's decision, and I trust the chief to come to a positive resolution.
Fraud! You're a fraud! Pick that up. You touch me again, I'll knock the shit out of you.
Anyway, good morning, Madam Auditor. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. I am City Auditor Mary Hall Caballero. and I am here today to share results of our latest audits and introduce brief presentations by the staff who led them. As always, my hope is that the commissioners in charge of bureaus that are the subject of our audits take our results in the spirit in which we intend them, which is for the city to become more effective, efficient, and equitable. We also hope to use these opportunities to speak to you as a group to highlight themes across audits that can apply to operations and programs, whether they are the subject of any particular audit we are presenting. The three topics for today are Recreation Center scholarships, street improvement projects, and the gang enforcement team. And we are going to begin with the Recreation Center scholarships.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Christine Adams-Wanberg, and I'm a Senior Management Auditor in the Auditor's Office, and I led the Recreation Scholarships Audit, which was released in March. So this particular audit, we looked at the alignment between Portland Parks and Recreation's current scholarship policy and the city's budget direction. We also looked at barriers that the public experiences when they're trying to access scholarships. We found that there were clarifications that were needed on the scholarship policy, as well as inclusion of scholarships in the formal budget process, and that the Bureau needs really a strategic outreach plan for scholarship information. Parks uses recreation scholarships really as a tool for equity and access, and those amounts for scholarships have been increasing over the past few years, from $260,000 in 2008 to $290,000 in 2017. That's about a 127% increase in those years. Parks is very sensitive to the affordability of its prices and the city policies that make access to that recreation a priority. The goals for access, however, are very difficult to reconcile with with the Bureau's need to generate that revenue for the community centers. So when scholarships are provided, the community centers lose funds they need to operate, and each center has a different goal for recovering those costs. The result of that tug between access and revenue generation is that a resident's ability to obtain a scholarship actually varies from center to center. So for example, a center that needs higher revenue from fees or is behind in generating its revenue may be less able to provide a scholarship to somebody compared to a center that needs less fee revenue or has met its revenue goal. So effective government programs make this deliberate and clear connection between the policies and the budget. Both council and parks have very clear policies on supporting access to recreation services, but the policies in this case don't necessarily carry through to the budget allocation. We looked at other jurisdictions, and most others support a budget for scholarships, and they have multiple revenue sources that support that. So not necessarily just general fund money support those scholarships in the other jurisdictions we reviewed. Some actually restricts what the scholarships can be used for or who they can be given to as well. So evaluating these program goals is a best practice in determining how well progress is being made toward improved access. And we noted that the City Budget Office recommended to retain the current decentralized and unfunded system. Information is difficult to find on the website, and information in program catalogs is also difficult, and the blasts are not equally distributed to the city. In the graphic that you'll see is the information in the back of the program catalogs. It's in the very back, and you'll notice that it is incredibly tiny and basically tells folks to go to the community centers for more information. Information, we wanted to note, was also rarely provided in a language other than English. In terms of recommendations, we had 4 of them. We recommend to clarify and update the Bureau's scholarship policy and implement it consistently throughout the centers. And this update we were hoping to have, we were hoping that Parks would have a work session with the council to get direction on whether those scholarships should cover a prioritized list of services, or if the services should be more flexible and more at the discretion of the customer. Second, to budget for scholarships and establish a funding source or funding sources, to report to the council periodically on the cost and performance of the program, and to develop a strategic outreach plan for scholarship information that overcomes those language and other barriers and really is consistent with the budget and revised scholarship policies. With that, I'd be happy to open up for questions.
Please, Commissioner Fritz.
Yeah.
Well, first, thank you so much for your audit, Auditor Caballero. I really appreciate the daylighting of this issue, which I've been trying to get the Council's attention for several years. And so I agree with everything in the audit. It's really very helpful. In fact, I'd like to read not only the beginning of that paragraph that you read, but the rest of it, just to emphasize. Effective government programs make a deliberate and clear connection between policies and the budget. Both City Council and Parks and Recreation have clear policies to support access to recreation services. These policies, however, do not carry through to the city's budget. The city does not set aside an amount in the budget to pay for scholarships. By not providing clear budget support for scholarships, each center is left to balance these competing needs to the extent possible. The Bureau cannot track scholarship costs accurately or provide transparent accounting to the public. So that, I think, is one of the important things. And colleagues, if you haven't had a chance to read this audit, it doesn't take very long. It's really clear and concise. As was noted, the amount of scholarships we're currently giving out is 590,000. Not coincidentally, we have a budget request for 600,000 in this year's budget. Once again, it's not recommended for funding. The audit really calls out how it was Director Charles Jordan, Commissioner Charles Jordan, who set the policy of everybody should have access to services. Now, we did have the work session that started the discussion on cost recovery. I would anticipate there will be another one where we will address that recommendation that you just made as to how to prioritize it should the council agree to fund the scholarships. We not only have the recreation-wide scholarships of 600,000 in the budget, but also an 80,000 request for cost recovery for preschool. I thank Eileen Argentini, the recreation manager who's here today. It's something that weighs heavily on all of our hearts because people don't know about the scholarships. You have to read all the way to the back into the tiny print. You have to be able to read English. So it's not open, even the system that we have. And what ends up happening is that people get the leftovers. So we can't give scholarships until the class has already got enough paying participants and there are a few spots left over. If we were really being equitable, we would be funding equal choice so that people who really need the services would be able to choose which class they want first rather than waiting to see if there's anything left over. And so I think this is really helpful, and I do encourage council to read it because it lays out much more clearly than I have ever been able to do why we need the specific line item in the budget.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Alexandra Furchak. I'm the Senior Management Auditor, and I led the street improvement projects, which was released in March, and this was an audit of the Portland Transportation Bureau. By reviewing selected transportation projects, the objective was to assess the planning, purpose, and evaluation process for street improvements. We found the Bureau of Transportation met expectations for the planning phase, but its evaluation of project effectiveness needs improvement. The city's transportation system plan includes goals such as safety, equitable transportation, and prioritizing certain modes of transportation, such as public transit and bicycling. The plans also include livability and prosperity goals, such as access to jobs, schools, and grocery stores, and supporting economic development. We found that projects included goals that supported the transportation system plan strategies, and the Bureau used an extensive public outreach process to communicate with residents and stakeholders and to obtain feedback on proposed street designs. Once projects are completed, the Transportation Bureau evaluates traffic data, for example, the number of cars or bicyclists using the improved streets or the number of car-related crashes. However, for livability goals, such as supporting local businesses or community development, it is not always clear whether the goals were accomplished or even how the street project changed the neighborhood. This includes any unintended consequences, such as traffic diversion to adjacent streets or changes to residents commuting. A full project goal assessment may require management to commit resources to a broader evaluation. To better achieve its goals through street improvement projects, we recommend that the Bureau of Transportation develop and fund a consistent evaluation process that includes livability and neighborhood impact assessments and use the results to inform the city's transportation plans. Thank you, and I'm open to any questions you may have.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and members of the Council. My name is Mindan Vuong. I'm a Senior Management Auditor, and with my colleague Elizabeth Pape, we worked on the audit of the Police Bureau's gang enforcement team. The gang enforcement team sends officers on patrol and also investigates shootings with a gang connection, and we audited both these aspects of gang enforcement. Our big question was, what are the results of their work? Let's start with patrol. The key takeaway is that Portland police must show that traffic stops for gang enforcement are effective. Officers pulled over drivers 1,300 times in 2016, and their goals were to deter gang violence and to seize guns. This map here shows that the gang enforcement team spends a lot of time in Northeast, and East Portland, and where the traffic stops happened. Officers usually use a minor traffic violation like drivers not signaling a turn to pull people over, and that's called a pretext stop because the traffic violation is a pretext for another investigative reason. We analyzed the stops data from the Police Bureau and found racial disparities. 59% of people stopped by the gang enforcement team were African Americans, and that is an overrepresentation compared to many other measures. For example, if you compare this to the driving population, less than 10% of the driving population is African American here in Portland. And I want to be clear, this does not allow you to conclude that officers have racial bias, or the opposite, that they do not have racial bias. But this analysis shows that officers are not randomly pulling people over, and that explanations like police is focused on those areas with high crime or high gang crime are also not sufficient. When we talked with community members during our audit, we heard concerns. For example, people worried that gang enforcement officers pull people over for minimal reasons and that they do not accurately target gang suspects. So to explain these disparities and to justify these frequent traffic stops, the Police Bureau needs to record the investigative reason for these traffic stops. Officers are not required to do that right now, and on this slide we show some examples of investigative reasons. We also looked at what happens after the stops. Police has not evaluated the results of these stops, but we found that 2% of encounters led to a weapon seized and about 10% led to an arrest. But the remainder were so-called no enforcement stops. The Police Bureau also cannot show if they stopped a gang suspect or someone with no connection to gangs. This needs to be tracked and explained to the community. And let me also discuss now investigations by the gang enforcement team. Here we are concerned about accountability and transparency. Even though the Police Bureau announced a few months ago that it would no longer designate people as criminal gang affiliate in police records, we found that the gang enforcement team has been and still is, or still was, collecting information at the end of our audit about people's gang associations. Specifically, the team created lists of most active gang members and associates, and an example of that list is pictured here. The Police Bureau used a point system to rank people based on gang incidents and interactions with police. And these included shootings and gun seizures, but also non-criminal events. Now, what concerned us was that the Police Bureau did not have a policy that guided this information collection or had set up safeguards. The Police Bureau also hadn't told the public about this most active list, so community members did not have a chance to give input. This, of course, is against the backdrop of past community concerns and also potential legal questions. And finally, we made recommendations to improve case management at the gang enforcement team. The team opened 159 new investigations in the year 2016, and we estimated that it sent 31 cases that year to prosecutors. The police needs to keep track of the clearance status of these cases and report reliable information, such as the clearance rate, to the public and to council. Previously, the Police Bureau had reported a 25% clearance rate to council, but we didn't receive backup documentation for that figure, so we carried out our own analysis and arrived at this 19% estimate here. We encourage anyone interested in these issues to go to the Portland City Auditor website, where we have posted this audit report on gang enforcement as well as all of our other audit reports. And that concludes our presentation, and we are available to respond to questions.
Very good. Let me respond with a statement, because we've had plenty of opportunities to go through this in detail, and I think you well know my opinion about this. But let me state a couple of truths. Truth number one is that this is a policy that derives from a culture that has been around for many, many years, if not decades. And I hope you have heard my forceful determination to change both the culture and the policies that are associated with the findings of audits like this. I'd like to read just a few paragraphs of my response because I'd like them on the record. The skewed demographics of gang-related shootings demand a heightened understanding of the activities of the gang enforcement team. Accordingly, the GET must be able to justify its practices through accurate and thorough data collection, as you've recommended. The audit correctly notes that it's difficult to demonstrate to the community that the GET is not engaging in racial profiling if there's inadequate data collection and analysis of stops, including so-called mere conversations. I'm pleased to share that several recommendations are currently either in practice or in process by the Portland Police Bureau. The Police Bureau has been collecting stops data since at least 2002 and has been issuing annual stops data collection reports since 2014. Data specific to the gang enforcement team will be published in the Police Bureau's annual stops data collection reports going forward. Outside of the report's recommendations, it's also important to highlight that the relationship-driven work of the gang enforcement team. The unit's efforts to build relationships have been instrumental in its collection of needed intelligence, its ability to intercede at critical points, and ultimately its ability to have a positive impact within the community. I applaud and wholeheartedly supported the recent anti-profiling bill, which was signed into law by the governor. It lays the groundwork for a new standard for the Portland Police Bureau to follow. No later than July 1st, 2018, the Oregon Criminal Justice Commissioner, in consultation with the State Police and Department of Justice, must develop and must implement a standardized method for all law enforcement agencies to record officer-initiated traffic and pedestrian stops data. Notably, this data must include the race, ethnicity, age, and sex of the pedestrian or driver and the results of the stop. This will apply to the gang enforcement team, and it reinforces the work currently underway by the Police Bureau. One more paragraph. I fully support the recommendations outlined in this report. These recommendations raise critical questions that strike at the heart of the gang enforcement team's practices, and I intend to conduct a full review and analysis of the practices at issue. Of particular concern to me is the treatment of so-called mere conversations and the apparent lack of unanimity between the Bureau of Emergency Communications and the Police Bureau. Though they may not fit the legal definition of a stop, there is community-wide recognition, and you heard this in many of your interviews, that mere conversations are more than community engagement. The GET's high rate of mere conversation certainly raises questions for my office, and I'd like for data collection for mere conversations to be included alongside annual stops data to provide a more holistic view of the GET's interactions with the community. Along with recording of investigative reasons for stops, there are some recommendations that deserve deeper analysis with respect to the feasibility and potential legal limitations. I'm committed to working with the Police Bureau to determine what those limitations are, if any, and to find solutions that will address the gaps identified in your audit report. Auditor, I appreciate your team's thorough analysis and review of the gang enforcement team. Thank you for your work. Chief Outlaw, I appreciate the fact that you wanted to be here today to hear this report, and I know you are committed to the principles that I've just outlined, and I look forward to working with you to address these issues amongst many others that we will be partnering on in the years ahead. So thank you, Chief, as well. Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you. I was really it's a very interesting report. Thank you for your thorough work, and thank you for your response, Mayor. So on page 20, you talk about that few stops resulted in weapon seizures, and you cited the 2% of the stops, and that there were no racial discrepancies between African Americans who are oversampled, and because of the more frequent stops, and other races who, in terms of weapons carrying. Am I understanding that correctly?
Thank you, Commissioner, for your question. We are looking here at, we carried out two different analyses. The first one looked at who gets stopped, and that's where we saw the racial disparities. That's where we saw 59% of people stopped were African American. Now, a subset of people stopped can get searched by police officers, and that's what we have here on page 20 you were referring to. We also try to analyze that data, and this analysis here did not show statistically significant differences in the search results among people of different races.
And you also mentioned, I think, 10% of the stops result in arrests. Did you look at the racial disparities, if any, in those?
No, Commissioner, we did not.
It's obviously a mine of information here, and you know, if the aim is to get the guns out of the community, especially out of the hands of people who are using them, the 2% is not a particularly high number, is it?
What we're asking the gang enforcement team and the police bureau to do here is to define goals for their gang enforcement patrol activities. Whether the 2% is high or low, I can't speak to that. I think the gang enforcement team would need to formulate expectations for its officers here.
Thank you. And then, Mayor, as part of the budget discussion, I'm going to be interested in more conversation about is having more capacity for officers to do self-initiated conversations, is that going to be helpful in improving safety in our community? Because I think some of these numbers kind of call that into question.
Very good. Thank you. Commissioner Udaley.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning. So I have a short list of questions which you may or may not be prepared to answer, but I want to put them out there at least as concerns. First, can you tell me how many officers are assigned to gang enforcement?
Thank you, Commissioner. At the end of December 2016, there were 28 sworn personnel in the gang enforcement team. That includes about 8 patrol officers and the remainder investigative personnel as well as managers.
Okay, thank you. So I'm struggling to see the difference between some of the tactics described in the reports and kind of stop and frisk efforts, which we're not using anymore, I believe, and are kind of associated with racial profiling. So do you have comments on, I guess, that potential of very minor infractions in order to engage with an individual?
Thank you, Commissioner. As we point out in the report, a lot of the stops initiated by the gang enforcement team are for minor traffic violations. So the officers are driving around neighborhoods in Portland and pull people over for running a stop sign, not having their turning signal on, speeding, etc. And what we're asking then the police bureau here to do is to explain the results of these traffic stops against goals for the gang enforcement team, such as contacting gang suspects, how many of these stops and encounters resulted in a contact with a gang suspect as opposed to someone with no connection to gangs, or gun seizures or arrests, or other goals that the police bureau might articulate.
I don't feel like I made that question very clear. It's that we've decided that certain practices are no longer acceptable, but it seems that these practices are very similar to those that we no longer employ. So that's my concern there. The second question on the patrol audit is, when can we begin seeing the data regarding the effectiveness of the tactics used by the GETS patrol team? Is there like a plan or a timeline?
I think that in the response there are some deadlines that the chief has articulated that she wants some of the recommendations to be done by. I am not sure about that particular issue, if there's a date specific that she wants.
I don't have the response in my binder, so. And then as far as the investigations and gang designation audit, it's disappointing to hear that you weren't able to access the 2016 records, given that intelligence records are supposed to be maintained for 5 years. So what actions will be taken to hold staff accountable for that?
I would refer that question to the chief.
To the chief, okay. Yeah, some of these questions probably are best for the chief. The GET is unique because it's one of the few units within PPB that has its own crime analyst who's supposed to provide in-depth research and data analysis. And I see in your recommendations that the data should be collected and analyzed. Can you give me a little more clarity on what is currently being gathered and how it's being utilized to further the efforts of GET? This is a particular interest to me because we seem to be aggregating data but not analyzing it and using it.
I think what the audit is pointing out is that the unit has the resource of a crime analyst, and that crime analyst would be dependent on information being brought back from the field about what the officers are trying to accomplish and what they are accomplishing. And I think that goes to the heart of the recommendations. If we understood the investigative reason that gang enforcement team officers are pulling people over, then you could do that back-end analysis to see, are we being effective? Was there a suspect in that car? Was there a gun in that car? And so I think that that's the heart of the recommendations around that analysis.
And then my final question is probably also best answered by Chief Outlaw, but I would like to state it. So one of the intended outcomes of the gang designation system is to increase officer safety. So officers know in advance when they're interacting with a gang member, but there's a concern that this is priming officers to act in more hostile ways with community members who are on the list, who may not be, well, since there's no proof that the designations are focused on the most dangerous offenders, they may not warrant that level of.
And I think our concern about the list was that there were people who maybe should have been on the list who weren't on the list, and people who are on the list that maybe shouldn't have been on the list. And so I think that diminishes the effectiveness for officer safety. And I believe that the officers were also concerned about the comprehensiveness of the list and whether it was useful for that purpose.
Okay. Well, I mean, obviously, many of us are troubled by the findings of this audit. Good relationships with the community members are essential to public safety, and they're essential to the safety of our officers. And the practices highlighted in the report, I think, demonstrate with only a third of our African-American community members express trust in our police force, which is something that we really need to remedy. But I do appreciate Chief Outlaw and the mayor's acceptance of the auditor's recommendations, and I'm looking forward to seeing some action. Thank you.
Mayor?
If I could just respond quickly to that. You have my commitment to action. I will be also asking that the chief and I get the tools and the resources we need to implement that action. And the auditor, I think, has done a great job of raising the questions and the issues and identifying the problems. It is our job to solve them. And as I hope my comments made very clear, there are some long-standing issues and policies and cultural aspects and training issues and data collection issues that will need to be addressed. None of this is going to come easy. None of it's going to come cheap. So I hope I'll have that support. Commissioner Fish.
I want to turn to page 16 of the gang crime investigations audit. And I thought it was interesting that you brought the Chicago experience into the conversation, and that we appear to be loosely based on, although they have much more robust safeguards that you've urged us to review. You also cite to professional associations and then model policies done by third-party groups. But because you invoke Chicago, which just in some ways may not be the model that I would normally want to turn to as the path forward for us on this, what are the other cities that are, in your view, doing a better job than we are in terms of promulgating policies, collecting data, communicating with the public, and following a number of the recommendations in your report, other than Chicago?
Thank you, Commissioner. In our audit, we did not look at other cities or other police agencies. We're mentioning the Chicago Police Department here because, as we understand it, the Portland's most active list as a methodology that try to follow the Chicago model, but during our audit, we did not look at other police agencies or cities in detail.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Udaley.
I just wanted to commend you on your budget pivot a moment ago.
I thought that was pretty good, too. I'm kind of proud of myself.
Make a pivot myself, which is that given the results of this audit, I am not convinced that this is the best use of these existing resources. So while I am open and actively engaged in conversations around the police budget and staffing, I want to make sure that we are making the best of our existing resources and our existing sworn officers.
No disagreement there.
Great.
Commissioner Fish.
I think we're probably winding down here, so I just want to, I think it's important to note that it was not that long ago that the auditor issued audits, issued a press release, and we did not have the formal process of a transmittal like this with the auditor and the senior staff presenting the findings to council, having this conversation. I actually thought it was odd that we didn't do that, but there was also a different climate, I would say, I put it politely, in terms of relationship between a former mayor and the auditor's office. So I want to compliment both the auditor and the mayor for continuing this practice of having the auditor's office formally present to the council. I think it's very important that we hear this directly and not just have an audit delivered to our office. It also gives us each a chance to ask questions. And on issues of this significance, where we're likely to have follow-up work sessions and conversations, I think is vitally important. And Madam Auditor, you have done a great job during your tenure, in my view, and one of, I think, the things that I'm most admiring of is the way you've defended the independence of your office, both as an advocate and at the ballot box. But we have 6 elected officials at this city, and you are one of the 6. And when you do audits, they should routinely come to council for presentation and conversation. Again, because that was not the practice for a long time, I want to observe that I think this is a real plus for transparency and accountability, and thank you and the mayor for continuing this policy.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thanks. Very good. I'll accept a motion.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fish, a second from Commissioner Saltzman to accept the reports. Please call the roll.
Fish.
I think I already just gave my closing speech. So thanks to the auditor and the auditor's team Thanks to the mayor for his commitment to address this in a timely and aggressive way. I do appreciate the fact that the chief is here to hear this conversation. And I would suggest that because of the complexity of these issues and the follow-up that's needed, I would hope that in the early fall we could arrange a work session at council to have a chance to Mayor, to continue this conversation with the chief and see if we're heading in the right direction. And to the extent you or the chief believe in the future that additional resources are needed at the Bureau for some purpose, I think we should have that conversation well in advance of the next budget session, budget cycle, so that we can understand the thinking of the Bureau more clearly. Aye.
Saltzman?
Well, I also want to thank you, Madam Auditor, and your staff for coming to the council to present your audits in the quarter. I do think it's very healthy dynamic for all of us to hear the audits, and there is a tendency in the city to silo things, and we tend to not delve into issues that relate to another commissioner's bureau or the mayor's bureau. And similar to when we created the Technology Oversight Committee, the whole idea was to make sure that these issues around technology and software were elevated beyond an individual commissioner to the whole council. And so the whole council has buy-in on these issues. So thank you for doing this, and I really appreciate it. Aye.
Udaley?
Well, thank you for the reports. I'm always excited to read them. It's education, a way to get to know the city a little bit better. Aye.
Fritz?
Thank you for bringing the reports to council. Thanks to Eileen Argentina from Parks and Chief Outlaw from Police. I particularly appreciate that only one of the 4 titles has the word "but" in it. And so the titles are framed in a very positive way and which says what we need to do. That the Police Bureau must show that traffic stops are effective, and lack of accountability and transparency reduce the community's trust in police. And I concur with Commissioner Udaley, since we don't have that many opportunities to discuss the budget in advance of the mayor's proposed, that I'm not entirely convinced, based on these audits, that we're using current resources effectively, or that increasing the number of patrol officers is necessarily going to help solve some of the issues identified here. And so that discussion needs to happen, because we all agree that we want our police officers to be safe, we want our community members to be safe, and we want people to be able to trust through a demonstration that there isn't a disparity in who gets stopped and what the outcomes are. So I hope that you will schedule another audit on this relatively soon, because I think that this is a measurable way for us to see, are we making progress on equity? Are we making progress on addressing racial disparities within the Police Bureau? And I'd very much appreciate the analysis from an independent perspective. As I also said, I definitely appreciate the recreational scholarships and even the graphic showing the burdens and the barriers and the tug of war between access and meeting fiscal responsibilities for the community centres. So thank you. Aye.
Wheeler?
Thank you for the report. One of the great oddities of our form of government is that I am perhaps one of the only, and maybe the only, person in the United States who is both a mayor and the police commissioner. And I will write a book on this subject someday, because it's fraught with peril and contradictions. I also acknowledge, as I read these audits, and as I indicated a moment ago, how much work there is to do with regard to building the effectiveness and the accountability of the Portland Police Bureau. That's why I hired Chief Outlaw, to come in here and be my partner to actually get it done. So not talk about it, not write reports about it, not whimsically wonder about what the future could be, but to actually do the hard work. And I am hearing my colleagues' admonitions. A quick vote tells me I don't, as of this moment, have support for increasing the Police Bureau budget at all. And so what I'm hearing is make the case. And I will rise to that challenge. I think that's an appropriate challenge, and it's the right one. And the chief has heard that we need to come up with a strategy to address this long-standing issue in the Portland Police Bureau, and we need to come up with it very, very expeditiously. So thank you for the report. Thanks for the challenge. I vote aye.
Thank you.
Next item, 341.
Establish emergency speed for Southeast Stark Street from Southeast 109th to Southeast 162nd at the city limits to support safe travel.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here from the Transportation Bureau. Many of our high crash corridors are in East Portland. Pedestrians crossing the street are dramatically less likely to survive at higher speeds. Lowering the speed limit makes a lot of sense, and that's why I support Vision Zero, and I want to thank Commissioner Saltzman in particular for bringing this forward today. Commissioner Saltzman.
Thank you, Mayor. When it comes to speed, it is easily really a matter of life and death. Excessive speed contributes to more than half of the fatal and serious crashes on our streets. If we can get people to slow down, we can save lives. For example, by reducing the speed limit by just 10 miles an hour, from 40 miles per hour to 30 miles per hour, the likelihood of fatality or severe injury for a person struck by a vehicle is cut in half. And that is why, along with the mayor, I have brought this proposal, this ordinance, emergency ordinance, to the City Council today to use our authority to reduce the speed limit on outer Southeast Stark Street from 35 miles per hour, which it is currently, to 30 miles per hour. Did I get that right? It is 35?
Yes.
Okay. So already this year, 2 people have died in traffic crashes on outer Southeast Stark. A 53-year-old woman died while walking on Stark at 148th Avenue. A 34-year-old man died while driving on Stark at 122nd Avenue. One of the fundamental principles of Vision Zero is that traffic deaths are not just inevitable. We can do something about them. We can reduce them, and we can get them to zero, and that is our goal. So today we do have an opportunity to take a big step in that direction by taking an emergency ordinance to reduce the speed on Southeast Stark to 30 miles per hour from from 109th Avenue to the Gresham city limit, or 162nd Avenue. So I want to thank the community members, some of whom are here today, who have advanced their concerns about safety on Stark Street and have asked us to take this action. Today's ordinance, as I said, will allow us to immediately reduce the speed limit on outer Southeast Stark, which I believe will help prevent more people from getting killed or seriously injured in crashes on this street. Director Leah Treat will give us a few remarks on this, also joined by Catherine Charlo, who leads PBOT's Active Transportation and Safety Division. And we're also very pleased to have Traffic Division Captain Mike Krebs here, and they will talk, and then we will invite 2 invited testimony, and then turn it over to council for questions. Yes.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Saltzman, Mayor, Commissioners. As Commissioner Saltzman noted, the ordinance before you today will allow us to reduce the speed limit on outer Stark from 35 miles an hour to 30 miles an hour. And the ordinance is necessary because we do not have the authority to reduce the speed limits on our streets in the city. It is under ODOT's purview, so we can reduce speed limits through an emergency ordinance for up to 120 days. So that's what we're trying to do today, and then we'll be at the same time submitting a speed reduction request to ODOT so we can have it permanently reduced. This is very similar to the process that we came to you last year with Outer Division to reduce the speed limit, and we're going to be doing the same thing that we did on Outer Outer Division and backing up this movement by installing speed safety cameras. Those will come online a little bit later, but we have found that when we reduce the speed limit and have it backed up by an enforcement effort, it's way more effective than just posting signs alone. So this is also following along on our Struck campaign that we just launched last week. I hope you all have had a chance to see it, but we're very hopeful that the media outreach campaign is going to have an impact on drivers' behavior as well. And as I've mentioned to you all many times, there's 3 things that we need to be effective in these efforts, and it's education, engineering, and enforcement. Those 3 things are the trifecta that help us get to the impact that we are trying to achieve. So those are the approaches that we are taking. And also, it's important to note that we're also going to be doing some crossing improvements on Outer Stark this summer that I think will help as well. So 3 crossings at 146th, 151st, and 160th Avenues. And finally, we've also started work on a safety redesign of Outer Stark. We'll begin that process with deep community engagement and feedback about what design and outcomes they want moving forward. So thank you all for your commitment to this effort, and I'm going to turn it over to Catherine to walk you through some of the details.
Great. Mayor, Commissioners, thank you very much for having us here, and Commissioner Saltzman for bringing this. I just have a few slides to give a little more detail to what Director Treat talked about. Let's see if I can advance the slides. First, the proposed ordinance. It sets an emergency 30-mile-per-hour speed limit from 109th to 162nd. We will accompany that with the installation of signs, 15 signs showing the lower speed limit. And we will also, as Director Treat said, install speed cameras in 2 locations to help bring those speeds down. And that's important because when we go back to ODOT at the end of the emergency period, we do want the speeds to be at a level that we can hopefully get a permanent reduction in the speed. And just, you've seen this graphic before. Slowing people down saves lives. What this graphic shows is the dramatic difference in fatalities when a pedestrian is hit by a car moving at 20 miles an hour versus moving at 40 miles an hour. But as the Commissioner mentioned earlier, even this 5-mile-an-hour differential has really significant impacts on the reduction in fatalities. Research that AAA did tells us that a pedestrian hit by a driver at 35 miles per hour is nearly 50% more likely to die than a pedestrian hit at 30 miles per hour. So that's what we're up to, especially in light of a pattern of fatalities and recent fatalities on Outer Stark. Why now? I think we've heard from the community, and we'll hear more, and we've heard from the Commissioner and the Director. The time is definitely ripe to address this and other major roadways in East Portland that are really presenting safety hazards in the community. Outer Stark is one of our most dangerous streets for all modes. It's our 6th worst street for driving. It's our 6th worst street for walking, and it's our 9th worst street for bicycling in the city. And we've heard clearly from the community that they would like to see this addressed, and this is an important step we can take to do that. Director Treat talked about the multitude of tools that we can bring to bear to try to improve safety, but specific to speed, we are currently pursuing speed and red light cameras on Stark at 127th or 148th Avenue. This is in addition to 4 sets or in concert with 4 sets statewide, and data shows us that they're effective. We've been collecting data at each of these locations, and we do see speed reductions as a result of these camera installations. You've seen this slide too, the Vision Zero Action Plan. Thank you all for your support of it over the last year.
In relation to lowering speeds, there's 3 related actions we're going to talk about or we're working on here. One is the installation of the speed safety cameras. One is lowering posted speeds, both as this emergency and then permanent, hopefully lowering over time. And then, as Director Treat talked about, we do need and intend to improve street design to support the lower speeds and improve safety. This is just a quick look at some of the challenges with design on Stark Street. There's no center medians. There's long gaps between crosswalks. There's no specially enhanced lighting, and we're seeing a lot of fatalities so far this year happen in dark conditions. There's exposed bus stops without much protection from traffic, and there's no bike lanes. So there's a lot to improve. In terms of tools that help actually reduce speed, we're looking, as Director Treat said, at enhanced crossings this year at 146th, 151st, 155th, and 160th. And then we're in a planning process for more improvements in which we'll engage the community to inform those improvements. That should be wrapped up by 2019, and hopefully those improvements will go in 2020 and 2021. And we use this graphic here as kind of a conceptual graphic showing some of the ways you can improve streets to slow speeds. These aren't specific plans for Outer Stark at this point, but there's some ideas. There's street trees, there's improved crossings, there's medians, there can be ways to narrow the travel lanes. And we'll be working with the community on those specifics. And then the last thing we wanted to do, hopefully we can make this work, I may need a little tech support here, is share just our quick struck PSA. As Director Treat explained, this is in concert with our enforcement, our automated enforcement and our physical improvements. This concept of citywide education to really help change the culture in the city and help people understand how critical it is to slow down and as a part of saving lives and really keeping the life of the driver from changing permanently as well. So let's see if I can do this.
Don't take it personally.
I know. I was warned. I don't know. I think we'll have to just, you can see this on the PBOT website. If you just go to the front page of the website, you can click on it and you can see it. It's a 30-second spot. It's quite powerful, and we've gotten quite a bit of response to it from the community, mostly positive, with a few people, having some questions for us. So.
Well, thanks, Catherine. Captain Krebs.
Yeah. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Mike Krebs. I'm the captain of our traffic division, and this is the absolute right thing to do. This is my job. My number one job of the traffic division is to help save lives and improve quality of life. And this reduction in speed is going to have a big difference out on Stark Street. Right now, if you're traveling 35 miles an hour, it takes you 96 feet to stop. From the time you see a hazard to the time you apply the brakes, to the time you skid and come to a stop, it's 96 feet. At 30 miles an hour, it's 74 feet. That's 22 feet where someone's possibly not going to get hit. I talked about this before. So you see the insurance commercial, cars going down the street, they collide with somebody, then you back it up. And if you slow them down, the crash will never occur. The brakes will be slammed on, the person will be scared, they'll take a deep breath and they'll walk away, and no one's injured. And this is, I think it's essential for the city and for PBOT and the Police Bureau to make this happen. One of the things I'll commit to is to make sure we have photo radar out there during this 120 days. Make sure we do missions out. We have Vision Zero missions. We run it throughout the city, and we'll make this a priority. One thing that I think is important too is that, before I came to the traffic division, I had not known much about PBOT, but since I've been here and working with those folks, they are some of the most committed public servants I've ever seen, and they are truly committed to achieving the goals of Vision Zero. And I look forward to maybe 50 years from now, we look back and we're going to see in this time the Vision Zero was the absolute right thing to do. And so maybe one day my grandkids or my great-grandkids will actually see the Vision Zero, and they'll know that in 20 2016, when this came forward, you're going to see that that's how this whole thing changed. And now, isn't it wonderful, kids, that no one's dying on our streets, that we can actually walk downtown or walk out on Stark and not be worried about getting hit by a car. And I think that, for me anyway, as a public servant, this is cool stuff. And I'm hoping you folks will do the right thing and let us reduce this from 35 to 30 and potentially save a life or even the quality of life. One of the things we talk about is fatalities. We've had 10 so far this year, but there are numerous others who no longer can work. They can no longer take care of themselves because of these crashes. So that's probably one of the most important things to me, is that we can change people's lives by doing this. And we may never know what it is. We'll never know. Maybe 10 years from now, wonder how many folks, we're not in a collision because we reduced it by 5 miles an hour. So I think you folks will do the right thing, and I appreciate your support.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner
I have
Daly.
a couple of questions.
Commissioner Daly and then Commissioner Fish. Commissioner Daly.
Well, thank you, and I definitely support this effort. I want to make a couple comments. Just, I've been following the 20 is plenty, or kind of public response to 20 is plenty in Vision Zero, and I really think we cannot underestimate the importance of community outreach, because there's still a lot of confusion in the community about 20 is plenty and Vision Zero. 20 is plenty seems self-explanatory, but it's not, apparently. Vision Zero is a little more obtuse, and I don't think we can assume that the broader community is aware of or understands that Vision Zero is actually an international movement to reduce and eliminate traffic fatalities. So I just want to encourage as much outreach as possible. And I also really appreciated that slide that shows injuries and death at 20, 30, 40, because I think for a lot of people, 5 miles an hour just sounds like no big deal. When I was taught how to drive at 17 by a driving instructor, he told me that I could drive 5 miles over the speed limit anywhere I go and not get pulled over and ticketed. And so I think that's also an important aspect of this to explain. 20 may seem really slow to some people. Frankly, it feels very slow on Ainsworth, which has a dividing boulevard, if not a line. But given that many people will be driving 5 miles over the speed limit, I think 20 is plenty, so thank you.
Thank you for the feedback. We'll work on that. Thank you.
I'm doing my best, one person education campaign, but.
Commissioner Fish.
I was at a forum the other day, and they presented some data, and 50% of the public doesn't get its information from traditional media anymore, and only 25% read papers. So the challenges of getting information out, including branding, is enormous. I will say that I was at the Montevideo Neighborhood Association the other night, and they had the 20-mile-an-hour sign right at the dais. So they had put it up in a very visible place, and I thought that was great. I'm a strong supporter of Vision Zero, and since Catherine's here, I have a few questions, and I just ask that you send me a follow-up email. So can you give me the cheat sheet on your ask in the budget for Vision Zero, and how much of that would benefit East Portland directly or indirectly?
Yes, we can.
Number two, I've learned a few things in some forums I've attended recently that were very sobering, including the fact that 15 of our 30 high crash corridors intersect East Portland. And we've got 3 or 4 of the deadliest intersections in the state, just on Powell. So could I get an update on our efforts to get ODOT to bring Powell and 82nd to city standards and then transfer them to the city so that we can maintain them? I know we all sent a letter recently to the not to ODOT, but to the body that oversees ODOT, complaining vigorously that that the improvements we're seeking on 82nd didn't make a 5-year planning horizon, which is just totally unacceptable. So can I get a sense of what the timeline is optimistically for getting those roads transferred to us? Congratulations to your team and our friends in the legislature for getting the $110 million for outer Powell improvements. I'd like to know a little bit more about what those dollars will actually translate into, what kind of safety improvements, and And so I have a better sense in the next legislative session of, what we're asking for and why. Okay. And then it's interesting. There's a debate in our community about enforcement, and you know this. And it's where enforcement and equity intersect. Now, I can tell you, because I've been out at a lot of forums wearing another hat, candidate, there's a tremendous appetite in East Portland to see this law enforced. But we're also hearing from advocates that they're concerned about it not being enforced in a way that is discriminatory. Right. We've had a discussion about that earlier today. There is obviously a lot of work to do to get people to slow down, because frankly, until people really feel the pain in their wallet, or are pulled over, there's some shaming, I think a lot of people are going to continue to speed, and despite our best intentions. So I would like to see vigorous enforcement, but I guess my question is, are you also collecting comprehensive data about who we're enforcing so that we can evaluate whether or not any disparate impacts are revealed from the data? Captain?
I can respond if you like, sir. I think that's a great question. It's something that's near and dear to my heart. I pay very close attention to the stops data. I just barely gave a presentation at Division 0 committee meeting on our stops data. And traffic stops data is consistent with the crash injury rate. We measure the injury rate and the people involved in crashes, and we're very close. Our stops are very close and consistent with how people's driving behavior. And it's each time I get the new quarterly updates on stops data, I look close at those kind of things. And my folks know that equity is important to me. And so far, my officers are doing a really good job of, we are stopping the people that are driving recklessly or dangerously. Usually with LiDAR, we use a LiDAR gun, they're coming at us. So we're not looking for the occupant per se, we're looking at the behavior of the car and the driver.
Well, and we have, I guess, the benefit of knowing where the high crash corridors are, where the most dangerous intersections are, and we can do, blanket enforcement in those intersections. And look, I appreciate, particularly in light of the presentation earlier today, that people will be looking very closely at who we pull over and who we enforce the law against. But I'm also hearing from the community out in East Portland that they want this law enforced, and they want people to slow down. And it's going to take time, because a lot of people haven't gotten the message yet, both on our residential streets now with the 20 mile an hour, and certainly in places like Powell, Stark, and 82nd. But I appreciate Commissioner Saltzman bringing this forward. I will wholeheartedly support it, and I hope we can get some further legislative approval, Commissioner, down the road to have more authority to regulate these streets for longer than 120 days. Okay. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our presentation. We invited Kim Marks and Joanna Molina from the Rosewood. Oh, there they are.
Thank you.
So that's our one invited panel, and then we'll open it at any other public testimony.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I've prepared a few written remarks, and then I want to go extremely just off my remarks to address something that Commissioner Fish just touched on. My name is Kim Marks, and I am the Director of Transportation Equity at Rosewood Initiative. I am here today to speak to you about the ordinance to reduce the speed limit on Outer Stark Street from 35 to 30 miles per hour. I want to start by thanking you for bringing the ordinance forward and tell you how appreciative the community is. I also want to give special thanks to Commissioner Saltzman, his staff, and the staff of PBOT for their responsiveness when we brought this request to them. As you know, Outer Stark Street is one of Portland's 30-plus high crash corridors. In fact, it's one of the top 10 since November 2016 when I started at Rosewood Initiative. 2 drivers of vehicles and 4 pedestrians have died from crashes between 122nd Avenue and 162nd Avenue. I myself have almost been hit on numerous occasions attempting to cross Stark Street. Outer Stark is primarily a residential street with a large concentration of multifamily housing complexes and more on the way. Without this ordinance, the chance of more deaths is a near certainty, which will only become more so as the population along Stark increases. I do want to point out this ordinance is the first step towards making Stark a safer place to live. Another necessary step was the passage of the $10 million for Outer Stark in the Build Portland budget, but only if we make this an opportunity to redesign Outer Stark. I would also note that just paving it will actually invite more people to violate the speed limit and not let it be just another paving project. Another important step will be the proper funding of the Outer Stark safety project. We all can make Outer Stark a safer place, a safer and inviting place for the community. Rosewood Initiative and the Rosewood community stand ready to work with you and PBOT to make Outer Stark an example of how we get to Vision Zero. Now, to address the questions that, or points that Commissioner Fish raised. Yes, we want enforcement. We are concerned about how that enforcement is conducted, which is one of the reasons we are very supportive of technologies like speed and red light cameras, which take potential for unknown bias or bias that police officers are not necessarily aware of. The other thing that I'd like to point out is for too long we've relied on education and enforcement, and that's one of the reasons why we believe that design needs to take a much bigger, be a much bigger part of the discussion. People are going to speed, people are going to do stupid things, but those abilities or those behaviors will be reduced if the design of the street does not invite those behaviors. Wide streets with long intervals of nothing to slow them down or to stop them, those are the things that will, addressing those are the things that will actually be the biggest tool in the toolbox, as people like to say, to reducing deaths and serious injuries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Buenos días a todos. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and speak up my thoughts. I think you guys need to hear from somebody who lives in that neighborhood, and that's me. I really want to thank you, to thank everybody who's behind this emergency ordinance, because with this ordinance, you guys give the opportunity to mothers to go back to their sons at home and to sons to go back to their mothers at home. 5 miles maybe is not a big deal for everybody, but it does. It makes a huge difference on people's life, on the people that will live there. Maybe a lot of people found ridiculous for me to drive my car to work. I just live across from of my job, 5 minutes walking. But after almost being killed many, many times in 160, so I decide that I don't found ridiculous. I found safety to drive my car to work, just 5 minutes walking, because I want to go back to my house with my kids. So I want you guys to keep that in mind at the time to put in place this emergency ordinance. The last time I was crossing 116, it's a signal crossing. I wait in the middle, and I almost get hit. The car touched my clothes, and I stopped to check everything. I was fine. I was scared, but I can bet you that the guy who was driving the car was scared too, since he stopped just maybe 30, 40 feet up front. But again, 5 miles is not a big deal, but it will make a huge difference in my life and in the life of everybody who lives in that neighborhood. So thank you, and I hope you guys think in other places that have the same issues has 129 and 160 seconds and take actions immediately. So thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We appreciate your being here. Is there any further public testimony?
Yes, we have 5 people signed up.
Very good. Thank you.
The first 3, please come on up, are Terry Parker, Robert West, and Nathan Clark.
Good morning. Mr. Parker, would you start us off, please?
Terry Parker, Northeast Portland. Bicyclists not stopping at stop signs. Pedestrians ignoring don't walk signals. Bicyclists not stopping for pedestrians in crosswalks. Pedestrians not looking both directions before stepping into the street. Bicyclists ignoring traffic signals and other traffic control devices. Pedestrians crossing thoroughfares mid-block just a few feet from a crosswalk. Bicycles riding against traffic on the wrong side of the street. These are just a few of the bicyclist and pedestrian infractions I observe every time I am out and about. Failing to look at the entire picture, all that comes from PBOT is profiling drivers and making it more difficult for them to get around. Road diets, slower speeds, and increased densities all add up to more congestion. More congestion means engines are idling more and running longer, thereby increasing fuel consumption and emissions. With PBOT creating more congestion, linking up motor vehicles with air quality issues must be fake news. Similar to congestion being self-inflicted by reducing instead of increasing motor vehicle capacity, many of the hazards of biking and walking are self-inflicted, in part due to the culture this city has created. Some of it is defined in the comp plan, which includes a discriminatory hierarchy mode hierarchy, With no enforcement, along with the city's obvious bias, car-hater mindset, bicyclists and pedestrians have been given carte blanche to ignore both the rules and common sense. Equity is absent. With the housing emergency, the current policy is to build a way out of it with density. The reality is, with more housing comes more cars and a need for more room for cars, which includes off-street parking to store them when not in use. Without more places for cars, more conflicts will occur and more people will be hurt. One of the failures of the political oratory and agenda is not initiating a discussion connecting population growth with homelessness, poverty, climate change, sustainability, and yes, congestion and Vision Zero. For everybody's health and safety, a continuing conversation needs to take place about how to start managing population growth, preferably with the public voluntarily accepting smaller families. Yesterday, I drove on eastbound Stark Street from Mall 205 to 162nd, heading towards one of my out-and-about destinations. Watching my speedometer while I was keeping up with moderate traffic flow, my average speed was about 32 miles an hour. I view this speed change as a feel-good, do-little way that, for the most part, fritters away transportation dollars that could increase cut-through traffic on residential streets. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Okay, one thing I'm going to talk about is an experience that I had last night. About 11:30, I was going down Stark Street over there by that park where there's like no lights. There's a situation where 5 people almost became bumper trash. And what happened was they decided to run across the street in dark clothes in front of traffic. I had to slam on my brakes and throw my brights on so the car next to me could see there was actually pedestrians crossing, so they didn't run right over the pedestrians. I see continuously pedestrians violating the law up and down Stark Street. You're sitting there saying, well, let's hit the cars for the pedestrians not doing what they need to do. Okay, you learn when you're a little kid, you look both ways before you cross. Okay, when you get older, you should be able to know, hey, that I can't cross because this car's coming down the street. I'll wait till this car is done past me, and then I can cross. Okay, pedestrians aren't learning that. They're learning that, hey, if I step out and I get hit, someone's insurance company is going to pay me. And this is wrong. Reducing the speed limit is wrong. It's just another way for the city to make money. They're talking, oh, we'll put up red light cameras. I hear continuously the city sits there and says, well, we don't get any money for our tickets that we write. The state gets it. Okay, but we have a contract with this company to set up these red light cameras and speed cameras and stuff like that. Who is paying for this contract for this company to do this? Okay, if the city of Portland's not getting no money from its tickets, then where's that money coming from? The state's probably not paying for it. That means the city's paying for it. Why are we paying for something that we're not getting anything back on? It just boggles my mind. You guys just want to throw money away. Hey, here's a problem. We'll just throw money away. We'll reduce speed. You've reduced speed on a number of places. I heard on the scanner the police didn't want to pursue a car that was going 100 miles an hour up Airport Way. Now, I can't think of any more dangerous situation than a car going 100 miles an hour up Airport Way with all the shuttles and buses and people going to the airport and stuff like that. Makes the city look really good when we can't pursue those people. I've also heard several times that the police decided not to pursue a stolen car because it was going 35 miles an hour down side streets, which made people in the car that I'm riding with laugh. You know, so, and as far as Stark and Division and stuff, I see cops speeding all the time up and down that street. Are you going to tell them they got to follow the 30-mile-an-hour rule unless they're going to emergencies? They crash too. So I want you to think about that.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today to read Multnomah County Commissioner Lori Stigman's testimony regarding the speed limit reduction on Southeast Stark. My name is Nathan Clark. I'm a policy advisor for Commissioner Stigman, and although unfortunately she's unable to be here today as she had a prior commitment, she wanted to make sure you knew how much she appreciates the policy work you are doing to reduce traffic fatalities and improve safety on high crash corridors. Her letter is as follows. Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners, thank you for considering this life-saving ordinance, and a special thank you to Commissioner Saltzman for bringing forth this important issue. I represent District 4, East Multnomah County, which begins at approximately East 148th in Portland and extends all the way to Bonneville Dam. While I have just a small portion of East Portland in my district, this ordinance, if passed, will have a big impact on the safety of our community members. Since the beginning of 2016, there have been 99 traffic deaths in Portland. 11 have been in my district, and 3 of those were on Stark. One of the recent deaths on this section of the street was of a woman who was trying to cross safely in a designated crosswalk but was struck by a vehicle. As residents have been pushed east in an effort to find more affordable housing, many folks are transit dependent, and even though this area and our infrastructure is much more accessible by car. As you travel further east, our arterials change to 4 lanes, marked crosswalks become less frequent, and many residents walk along roadways to access transit, work, and school. All of these community members deserve to safely travel to their jobs, their schools, and their places of worship. Lowering the speed limit on Stark Street from 35 miles per hour to 30 miles per hour will undoubtedly save lives. Thank you for the opportunity to submit my testimony. I look forward to our continued partnership with the City of Portland to ensure an active transportation plan that is safe for pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorists. Commissioner Lori Stigman, District 4, Multnomah County, Chair of the East Multnomah County Transportation Committee. And as someone who grew up near 162nd since I was 6, and my family still lives there, I appreciate these efforts to make it safe for all of our community members. Thank you.
Thanks all 3 of you.
Thank you for being here.
The last 2 are Dan Handelman and Mary Sipe.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch. We don't have really a position on speed limits themselves, but as Commissioner Fish pointed out, and the Oregonian, to our surprise, the reduction of speed limits can lead to racial profiling. There was not an answer from Captain Krebs about whether or not there's going to be specific data kept on the enforcement in this new corridor, which is, I think, the question that Commissioner Fish was trying to get at. And of course, there's been a diaspora of the African-American community to that area of the city, so it's possible there are more African-Americans in that area, but one can compare that population to the number of people being pulled over. Commissioner Fish also referenced the report you heard earlier, and in that report, the gang enforcement team said they will follow a person until they commit a violation, because they'll do it if you follow them long enough, which is very serious violation of rights, because that means they were not following them with any reasonable suspicion in the first place. Certainly hope that's not going to be happening in this new corridor. There was also discussion about the new stop data, which again, we're encouraging you to collect for this. The stop data, if it comes back from the state and it's inadequate for the needs of the city, we certainly hope that the city will add things to that template that will meet the needs of the people of Portland. So we're not only depending on what the state says we have to collect. And then in terms of mere conversations, the report also said that the GET did 1,300 stops and 500 were keyed in as mere conversations. And again, in this corridor, if you're going to be having missions, you want to take a look at how many times people are just let go with just a verbal warning if your goal is to reduce traffic crashes and such. I've managed to reference a few times the report that you were able to hear earlier. This is the second time in 3 months that a report came forward about police that the mayor refused to take oral testimony on during the presence of the report being presented in public. I can spend an hour trying to write up commentary, or I can come up here and talk for 3 minutes and respond to what I've heard in City Council. I think the second is more effective, because I don't think everybody reads it when I send in commentary from Portland Cop Watch. The mayor's staff, I emailed on Friday to see if there would be an exception to the no report rule. I did not hear back from them. I called again yesterday afternoon just to see, and it's just not getting a report back. So I feel like when you're having these important discussions around police issues, are important to the community, it really would be a good idea, if we're doing community policing, to let the community speak and have input about them.
Very good. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Mary Sype. I just want to kind of piggyback on your comments about not taking testimony on reports, and would just like to encourage you to be more flexible in that regard. That said, I'm really concerned about some of the comments I just heard. 5 miles an hour, it's no big deal. A dead child is a big deal. And to hear people put the onus on the pedestrian and how irresponsible the pedestrian is, it blows my mind. I'd like to ask Mr. Parker and Mr. West if a distracted child were to run out in front of their car, and the chances of that child being seriously injured or killed was reduced greatly because you are now going only 30 miles an hour. Wouldn't you support this reduction? What it says to me is, my goodness, I just avoided killing somebody's child because I'm driving 5 miles less per hour. It's just a no-brainer to me, and I just had to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's all who signed up.
Very good. Please call the roll.
Fish?
Commissioner Saltzman, thank you for bringing this forward. Thanks to the community for advocating loudly for this change. I want to acknowledge that when Leah Treat was hired, one of the credentials she brought with her is that she had been a national leader in this Vision Zero movement, and has put us on the path to doing some important things. And as we debate the tough budget choices ahead, I would like to make sure that we're prioritizing investments in street and sidewalk safety, particularly in East Portland. It is going to take a culture change. I'm a candidate for re-election right now, so I'm going all over the city, and I can tell you that on the residential streets that we're marking as 20, people are not doing 20 miles an hour. And what people are doing is getting frustrated and then gunning it to get to the stop sign 5 seconds ahead of me and putting people at risk. And so it's gonna require a culture change. I think the point is very well taken that ultimately we're gonna have to invest in design changes because design is an important point, but enforcement has to be part of it as well. And people have to know their consequences and they're gonna be held accountable. I appreciate this action. And I hope at some point, Dan, that we reclaim our authority as a local jurisdiction to regulate these streets without doing it just on an emergency basis. Aye.
Saltzman?
Well, I also want to thank Director Treat and the Bureau of Transportation for all of their work on making a more balanced transportation system for the city of Portland, but with special emphasis on Vision Zero and to really reduce the number of fatalities and severe injuries that are occurring in our city at too frequent of a rate these days. I want to thank the Rosewood Initiative for being here today and for coming to meet with me a few months ago about this emergency speed reduction, which is before us today. I want to thank Captain Krebs and the Traffic Division for the great work that they're doing to keep people safe and alive. And finally, I just want to thank Shana Hobbs in my office who shepherded this process, brought this all forward, and brought it to culmination today. And I do believe that we can really, as I said in my opening remarks, a small reduction in speed can produce dramatic increases in a person's safety if they are struck or struck by an automobile. And it's a step well worth taking, in my opinion, and I'm pleased to vote aye.
Udaley.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Saltzman and Director Treat, for bringing us this before us today. And thank you, Ms. Sipes, for your remarks. I also share your disappointment in some of the testimony that was given today. We were asked, why are we paying for something we're not getting anything back on? 50 people died in traffic fatalities in the city of Portland last year. And if we can reduce that number by one or more, I would say it's well worth the investment. Traffic fatalities have been declining since the 1970s until recently, and now we're seeing an increase. And we're seeing an increase because there's more people on the road and because there's more competition for a variety of uses of roads between vehicles, pedestrians, and cyclists. It's a false assumption to say that these accidents are being caused by cyclists and pedestrians who are not obeying traffic laws. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. Sometimes neither party is at fault, and it's a poorly designed road. Regardless, I don't think it's any consolation to families who lose loved ones or people who are grievously injured in traffic accidents that it was their fault. It's our job to preserve and improve public safety, and this is a step towards it. I would like to mention again that Vision Zero is an international movement to reduce and eliminate traffic fatalities. It is supported by the World Health Organization. Sweden, I think, was one of the first countries to implement these policies and, in fact, have the safest roads in the world. So there you have it. I vote aye.
Fritz.
Thank you, Commissioner Saltzman, Director Treat, Catherine Charlo, for your work on this. I was struck by Commissioner Udaley's comments about her driver ed class, and I think many of us in the past have had the frame of, I won't get caught if I'm going 5 miles an hour over the speed limit. As Commissioner Fish said, I think we need to create a new culture. And I'm thinking back to 25 years ago when the culture of Portland was not to pick up after your dog. And I live on a corner lot with a utility pole, and I had to do a sweep before I'd let my children play outside because there was so much dog deposits in the yard. I don't remember now the last time that I have picked up something from my yard, and we have changed the culture. Owners proudly carry along their little baggie and doing their civic duty, and that's what this gets down to me, is creating a new culture. We're never going to be able to enforce enough to be able to make people behave. We're going to need to want people to behave and explain to them why. And I've explained to my children that the reason that there are speed limits, particularly in neighborhood streets, is because that's the safe limit for how fast you should be going. I also have, since being in office, I've mentioned that if they get stopped and Willamette Week gets a hold of it, that is not going to reflect well on me, so would they please just keep that in mind as well. You try everything that might possibly register. I love the 20 is Plenty campaign. Thank you, Mary Sype, for noting that we each have a reader board within our car. I have been watching my speedometer on my neighborhood street and doing 20 instead of 25. I was previously watching it very carefully and doing 25. I find I arrive at the arterial more relaxed. I find that I am more aware of my surroundings, and it's just generally a better way of doing things. And so I encourage people to do this for the right reasons. Actually, wiki rhymed to see what a good slogan for 30 would be. I'm kind of hampered that I have a TY at the end rather than a DY, 20 and 30, in their 20s and 30s, but still. So they're wandering around by themselves in downtown Portland and elsewhere. I carry a flashlight in my bag, and when I'm a pedestrian, if it's at night, I've got my flashlight going. And I find that cars tend to stop for me to allow me to cross the street because I flash the flashlight in their face and they know that they're supposed to. So again, it's about a culture change. And I hope that we will all do that. Take this to heart, both as pedestrians, as cyclists, as drivers. We share the road, and we need to figure out how to share the road in a safe manner. I did do a quick calculation here. It's 2.7 miles from 109th to 162nd on Stark. And at 35 miles an hour versus 30 miles an hour, the difference in travel time is less than a minute. So again, when you're feeling like you want to push it, that you're late, whatever, you're going to get at the most a minute. And as Commissioner Fish said, you may hit the lights wrong anyway. Many of the lights are set at the appropriate, so that when you go the appropriate speed, you don't get stopped at every single one. These are all common sense things that we can take responsibility together for being safe. And I also like to say I have never looked forward more to the Rose Festival presentation, which is coming up next, so that we can move on from this topic, which of course is dear to my heart. Aye.
Wheeler?
So thanks, Commissioner Saltzman, for bringing this forward. And you brought what I'll call a companion package forward early in the year. I strongly support this. I think this is great policy. I'm sorry we can only do it on a limited duration basis, but I'm sure with Dan's great work in government relations and this council will all work together to have more permanent and resilient solutions. Education, enforcement, and engineering are the three major categories of tools that we have at our disposal. This is obviously addressing one portion of those tools. I'm really energized by the community engagement piece on looking at a larger engineering strategy as well. I think that's exciting, and so I'm strongly supportive of this. I do want to quickly respond to what Dan Handelman had said with regard to reports. And I've been on all sides of this question of public testimony on reports, and I ultimately came down the way I did with regard to reports in that they are very specific, particularly with regard to audit reports. And as you heard, audit reports used to be published. They used to have a response attached. They'd go out, and people could either pick them up or not pick them up. Now, of course, people have the opportunity to hear the auditors who are actually engaged in the process. The council has the opportunity to ask questions of the auditors who conducted their audit, and the opportunity exists for the bureaus to be able to respond to the audit. Audits have very specific scopes of investigation, and the responses given by the bureaus are very specific responses to the issues and the findings of that audit. And as such, it is a very prescribed process. And I think one of the most effective aspects of audit reports is they are so specific. They drill in like a laser beam on issues of great importance. And I want audit reports to maintain that focus as they are brought forward, and I want people to be in a position to respond very specifically to those issues. More generally speaking, with regard to reports, it's obviously at discretion of the council, but we typically ask a group or an organization or an entity to go forth, and by legislative requirement, they do something and they come back and they report what they are required through legislative requirements to report. So these are very, very different than people coming up and talking about police issues or talking about the police budget or alternative uses of resources. It's really supposed to focus on the issue at hand. That's the point of the audit report. So Dan, wanted to give you my perspective on that. I see you not agreeing, and that's fair. I have no monopoly on the truth, but I wanted to give you my reasoning for the decisions that I make, and I will not speak for the rest of the council. I vote aye. Well done. Ordinance is adopted. Next item, please. 342.
Grant revocable permits to the Portland Rose Festival Foundation to perform activities relating to Portland Rose Festival annual celebration from May 25 through June 10, 2018.
Are you taking this first?
I'll take it.
Nick Fish.
Thank you, Mayor. It's my honor and Commissioner Saltzman's honor to formally bring this ordinance before council. Each year, the Portland Rose Festival Foundation comes before us to seek permits so that it can put on the world's best festival of its kind. And that's what's before us today. Jeff Curtis is going to walk us through the request, but the particular permits relate to the Grand Floral Parade, the Junior Parade, the Starlight Parade, and the use of Tom McCall Waterfront Park and some street closures. I think we should acknowledge, as we welcome our friends from the Portland Rose Festival Foundation, that not only is this a internationally recognized event that they plan and execute, but it also generates a lot of revenue for the city, and by some estimates brings in about $75 million a year, which is why I have felt so strongly about including in our annual budgets some contribution back, recognizing the service that the foundation does as our officially recognized festival. They're not just any festival. In 2010, we made them our official festival. So here to walk us through the request is Jeff Curtis, the indefatigable Executive Director. Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Fish, Mayor Wheeler, distinguished council. It's my honor to be in front of you today, and Commissioner Saltzman, thank you for your leadership of PBOT in support of the festival, and as this ordinance came by, and Allison Madsen at PBOT and the staff for making this annual tradition of coming in front of council and getting this permit on board moving forward. I get the honor of being up here to represent a great organization, a not-for-profit organization that does the work for Portland in the context of producing a celebration for Portland as your official festival. But behind me is a core group of volunteers and staff that are really the heavy lifters that make it happen. Most notably, Brett Baker is with us this morning. He's our current president of our board. And taking the reins in just a few months, in October, Terry Bowles-Atherton is also joining us this morning. Volunteer leaders, passionate about this organization and with the mission that we serve. Then the details and ultimately the product of the street that ends up on the streets, led by Marilyn Clint and her staff, producing world-class parades, as well as a waterfront presentation. Those are the people, the front lines of an organization of some 3,000 volunteers. The nature of this presentation is ultimately is about the reality of making it happen. Actually, the coursework making it happen. We'll be here in about a month with the court to tell you the details and share with you the ultimate experience of this year's festival. I just want to provide some context to the meaning from the Rose Festival Foundation of this ordinance. The theme this year, I will say, is play happy. And we're going to press the button on play in about 6 weeks. But this ordinance is the key, kind of the keys to rev up the engine. It allows us to finalize our planning and ultimately, what I think most, and Allison can speak to this, because she coordinates this, is it mobilizes the city in a unified front to put our best foot forward, to bring our citizens together under the theme of Play Happy this year and welcome the world to Portland for a 3-week period of time. And this ordinance and your support of that is what makes that happen. And it's not forgotten on me after 14 years of doing this that this is an important day for us, council, for you to take this item up. Prior councils for 111 years have had this same duty and responsibility, and I really do appreciate it. Allison, I know from a PBOT perspective, I'll allow you to share.
Yeah, that's a little hard to follow. There's not much more I can add. We do have just about every bureau in the city touching on some aspect of Rose Festival and the activities, and your support of this document does allow us to engage in the manner that we do. Happily to support this annual event. I've had the pleasure of sitting next to Jeff since 2008 up here with us, and happy to have my portion of this annual festival. So if there's any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. I think very good. Is there any public testimony on this item?
One person signed up, Robert West.
My name is Robert West, and let me be frank and clear. I enjoy the Rose Festival, and I like it. In fact, I like carrying my signs at it. What I disagree with is the permit. It's like this. If I go out and I do a protest, and I have a permit, I got the police escorting me, not a problem, all that, right? But if I do a protest march without a permit, the police come out with the riot squads and beat me and my fellow marchers up. Or they pepper spray us, or they hit us with gas. So as far as I look at the permit, it's legal extortion. Because you're charging these organizations, you're charging other people money for these permits. And yeah, I know you gotta spend your money, you gotta get money somehow. The streets in southeast Portland are falling apart and got big old potholes and stuff. And there's been damage done to my car from those potholes and damage done to other people's cars. But I'm going to get back to what I'm getting to. Like I said, I like the Rose Festival. I don't like the idea that the city makes the Rose Festival people get a permit. I think it's inappropriate. Now, there's other people that say that the Rose Festival was started by the Nazis and the Ku Klux Klan and stuff like that. But the Rose Festival brings people out, people enjoy it, people have a good time. So I don't dislike the Rose Festival. I may not like how it came to being, but that's how I look at it. I mean, it's a great thing for the city. And you get merchants that come out and want to sell things and stuff like that, you know, capitalism at its best. And instead of, you know, if I was walking up the street and I was thirsty and I needed some water, of course there's no one to give me water. But if I had $1.50, I could buy some water, which is, in my opinion, pretty bad, but that's the way capitalism and that's the way the city works. But yeah, that's basically what I wanted to say is I'm against the permit, but I'm for the Rose Festival. So that's what I got to say.
Very good. Please call the roll.
That's a
This
non-emergency.
is a non-emergency.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mayor, I move to include an emergency clause so that we can give them a head start in getting their permits.
Good, second, because I was ready to call the roll anyway. So thank you, Nick, for bailing me out on that one.
This is for the purpose of it's in the public interest to get the permits going as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. Please call the roll, Carla. Thanks.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. Permits are approved.
No, yeah,
That was
call the
emergency
roll.
clause.
That was just having an emergency.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was the amendment. Please call the roll.
Fish.
Well, this gives us an opportunity to say thank you while you're here and not next week. So to Jeff Curtis and to the A-team he brought with him today, can't wait to meet the court, and then looking forward to all the festivities this summer. Thank you for every year making our city so proud. Aye.
Saltzman?
Well, thank you to the Rose Festival for organizing all the events you do and doing it. It appears so flawless and smooth from our point of view. I'm sure it's not from yours, but it does run, and it's a big event for Portlanders. And I want to thank Allison Madsen from PBOT for all of her work in making sure that the city delivers on its deliverables to make this festival a tremendous success that it is. Aye.
Fritz.
Thank you for all your work. This is not only a fun time, and I think the theme of Play Happy is delightful. It's a huge economic benefit to the city, and it brings people together in a very positive way. And there's always some exercise to be involved as well. So that's always a good thing. Thank you. Aye.
Wheeler.
I appreciate Commissioners Saltzman and Fish bringing this forward, and I always appreciate seeing our representatives from the Rose Festival here in council. You come a lot, and I think this is one of the most positive things that we do together as a community at a time when, frankly, we need to do more together. So you provide us the platform to get together, to interact, to learn from each other, to break down barriers, but most importantly, we just have a lot of fun. And so thank you for being ambassadors. Thank you for being conveners. Thank you for being people who lift up our community and shine a light on all the really positive and terrific things that people are doing here. I can't thank you enough. I always look forward to the Rose Festival, and this year will be no exception. I vote aye. The permits are approved. Thank you. Next item, please.
Item 343, appoint Leah Sykes and Jessica Greenlee to the Rental Services Commission for terms to expire April 2020.
Colleagues, the resignations of Nick Cook and Ron Garcia from the Rental Services Commission in February left the commission with 2 openings. I'd like to invite Leah Sykes and Jessica Greenlee to join the commission and maintain the balance of landlord and tenant voices on the Rental Service Commission. I know both to be very eloquent spokespersons for their respective points of view. I know them to be people who work really well with others to explore ideas and challenge each other and do so in a respectful manner. I know both to be very highly experienced in bringing a lot of good knowledge and information to this very important process, and both know how difficult and challenging these things can be. And so I was really excited to hear that both of them would be interested in serving on this commission. Ms. Sykes brings to us her many years of experience in the legal profession, particularly the legal aspects of property management, working with market rate and affordable clients. And Ms. Greenlee was, of course, a dedicated member of our Relocation Assistance Technical Advisory Committee and has over 10 years in property management experience. I first heard her testifying here during our first Relo testimony. I was very impressed with the way she conveyed her information and knowledge, and she turned out to be a very, very important member of our Relo Technical Advisory Committee. Matt Scheibold is here to answer any questions that we may have, or it would be great to hear a little bit from each of our prospective participants.
Hi, I'm Leah Sykes. This is my first time in City Hall. This is really exciting. Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to serve my community this way. I'm an attorney, been an attorney now since 2002. The bulk of my practice has been focusing on representing property management companies, as you mentioned, in both the affordable and for-profit genres. But the largest part of my practice over the last 8 years has really focused on fair housing. And it's a passion of mine. I have helped form and put on every year what we call a fair housing fair, which this last year was attended by over 600 landlords and property managers. We had speakers from the Fair Housing Council of Oregon, from BOLI, from HUD, from the community, folks who had actually experienced housing discrimination firsthand. And it was really, it's always so rewarding to be able to give back that way and to educate folks. And I'm so excited to be kind of a part of this commission because I feel like I've worked really well collaboratively with folks who I think there's a perception they're kind of on the other side, right? When I go to court, I represent the landlords, and quite often Legal Aid is not who I work very well with, is on the other side of issues. I've done joint presentations with Legal Aid, with Fair Housing Council of Oregon, and what I note when I do these things is how close together we actually are on a lot of issues. So I'm really excited to kind of have the opportunity to join the commission and to maybe have a chance to bridge some gaps between, the sort of landlord side of things and the tenant advocate side of things, and work together to do things that really do benefit our community.
Thank you. And I think it's auspicious that we picked today to appoint you here on the 50th anniversary of the Fair Housing Act.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the invitation to be part of the Rental Advisory Committee. I really appreciate that opportunity to share my voice. Leah, you're a tough act to follow there. Through my experience on the Relocation Technical Advisory Committee, it really showed me that it's important for everyone to sit at the table and share perspectives to formulate the best possible policy moving forward. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to participate again.
Glad to have you. Colleagues? Commissioner Fish?
I move the report.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fish. We have a second from Commissioner Saltzman. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Fish?
Well, welcome on your first visit. I hope it was a satisfactory one.
Yes.
And thank you both for stepping up to serve. We have, I think, over 100 boards and commissions at the city, and each one helps us do our job better. And this is particularly urgent work, so to have people of your quality and your experience step up and say you'll serve really is very meaningful. So thank you for doing that, and we look forward to the benefit of your guidance. Aye.
Saltzman?
Well, I also want to thank you for your willingness to serve, and I think it's probably the city's newest commission. It's got to be. So we look forward to, as you chart the direction of our policies and also other things we should be doing to help renters and landlords alike. Thank you. Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Thank you both for your willingness to serve. It can be a very difficult job, as you already know from your experience with the previous processes. I note in the impact statement that, and the Mayor mentioned, that the Commission is required to have a balance between interests of renters and landlords. It's also required by code, which is unusual, to have membership that takes into account the socioeconomic, gender, racial, ethnic, cultural, and geographic diversity and various different perspectives. So if I could possibly get a table in the after as a follow-up from this.
Absolutely.
So that you could tell me, who it is and who's representing which part. Because I've found in the boards and commissions that I've been responsible for that can really add to the richness of the conversation. And I know you've been paying attention to it since, as you was mentioned, it's only very recently that this commission has been established and that direction was in the code. So
Yeah, we'll get you that.
thank you. And again, thank you very much for being willing to serve. Aye.
Wheeler?
Thank you both very much. Thanks, Matt. Aye. The report's adopted. The appointments are approved. Thank you and welcome aboard.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Next item, please. 344.
Assess benefited properties for street, sidewalk, and stormwater improvements in the Northeast Cooch Court Local Improvement District.
Commissioner Saltzman.
Turn it over to Andrew Abbey.
Thank you, Commissioner Saltzman. Pleased to report that when we formed this LID in 2014 at the east end of the Burnside Bridge, we had 100% petition support for this LID. We did not receive any objection to final assessment. And I just wanted to say that the LID funds that have been spent on this project, $487,000, have been a very good return on investment. with property values increasing from $7.1 million in 2014 to $190.9 million this year. So the combination of both public and private investment has helped realize a 16-fold increase in property values. And the work that the private investment that happened here would not have been possible without the ability for the public and private sector to partner and resolve some very intractable engineering and access issues with the tight geometry of the Burnside Bridge and the freeway on streetcar, and just trying to make everything fit and provide the needed road access to the new development. So we're very pleased with the outcome of the project and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you. I'm glad you mentioned the increase in property taxes, and I didn't think there were any ways to improve the local improvement district the way that you've been doing them, but perhaps including in this kind of a report a summary of what have the benefits been, and in particular in relation to what we heard earlier about the auditor's report, some of those findings on neighbourhood improvements, neighbourhood impacts and improvements, that would be a way to document and bring that into the record. So I hope that you'll consider doing that. And then the second issue on that point, you had in the past suggested that the council basically allocate that increase in funding and then use it to target particular LIDs that would cause even more return. Is anything happening with that?
Yes, I can, Commissioner. So after Council approved the Value Capture Resolution 37205, I think it was April 20th of last year, if I'm remembering correctly, we just haven't had any final assessments. We were busy in construction mode. This is, as I recall, the second LID that we've recently closed out. So the short answer is, Commissioner, I owe Council a value capture report, the first one, and I will definitely be doing that. The mayor also had some questions about property values, and I owe him a memo on that as well. So I have my work cut out for me, and this certainly motivates me to provide that information on both fronts. So
great, thank you.
And I also just wanted to briefly add that we had a lot of problems with the bike lane, the westbound bike lane on Northeast Coote Street approaching the Burnside Bridge. We tried a variety of things over the years to make it work. We had tried wands, we had tried solar reflectors, striping, rumble bars, a number of different things. And one of the things that I was particularly pleased about this project is because we were building Cooch Court, it gave us the ability to put in a raised bike lane and have proper drainage. So now when you ride your bike over the Burnside Bridge, you don't have the cars and buses quite wandering into the bike lane that you used to have. So we're hoping that with the Burnside Bridge having the second lowest number of bike crossings when we last did a count, we're hoping that that number will come up over time as the comfort of using that bike lane has increased, we think, since we did that final fix.
Commissioner Fish, did you have a comment? Very good. Is there any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
So let me just say before I move this along, thank you again. Once again, you're doing great work. Commissioner Saltzman, thank you. So this is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have 2 second readings, item 345.
Adopt the allocation methodology for the local transportation infrastructure charge, establish a maximum fee, amend charge required code, and direct staff to develop additional components of neighborhood streets program.
Colleagues, this is a second reading of an ordinance. It has been previously heard and public testimony has previously been taken. Is there any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Well, it's a pleasure to bring this to a conclusion, as I know staff and the public have been grappling with implementing the local transportation infrastructure charge and how best to use the resources garnered from it. And I believe we've landed in a good spot and a reasonable spot. We're bringing in transportation infrastructure dollars that have been missed for decades, and we have a solid plan to invest those dollars in needed neighborhood improvements. I'm also very excited about the gravel and grading program that adoption of this item kicks off, and I look forward to working with PBOT in the months ahead to get this up and running. It's something that we need. We've needed to do ever since the city annexed East County, and it's a great example of the Bureau listening to the public during this outreach process. And now just for a few thank yous, I want to thank, first of all, thank Commissioner Fish and the Bureau of Environmental Services for your partnership and steadfast support throughout this process. This has been another great example of two bureaus, Bureau of Environmental Services and Transportation, working together and working better together on behalf of the city. I want to thank Christine Leone and Peabody for leading the team and developing this proposal. I want to thank Kurt Kruger for your efforts and assistance throughout this process. You are on the front lines with developers daily, and I know you get an earful about the local improvement charge and many other things, so keep it up. I also want to thank Matt Grum in my office for helping to keep this proposal alive and moving. And finally, a huge shout out to Ann Hill for bringing all of this together and truly listening to the public. It was a big lift and a challenging project, and I really appreciate Ann's rising to the challenge, the occasion, and I'm pleased to vote aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Thank you, Commissioner Saltzman, for your work on this. This has been a gnarly problem throughout the time you've been on the council, and finally it's moving it forward. Thank you also for addressing the Ombudsman's and the Office of Equity and Human Rights' concern. I agree that the gravel and grading program has been desperately needed for a very long time. I do appreciate Ann Hill and Kurt Kruger, who spent a long time in my office going over all the various options with me, and I think this is a greatly improved proposal compared with what we had on the table a year or so ago. If I was the swing vote on this, I would vote to support it. But since I'm not, I am going to vote against it because the one issue that I think is not clearly resolved yet is the issue of whether people who pay this fee are exempted if there's a future local improvement district on their street. And again, while it's better than it was before, I think that if you pay into this, you've basically done your duty, and your home shouldn't be responsible for anything in a future local improvement district for your street. So for that reason, it's a small detail, but I think it's important sometimes for the community to know that there's some reservation still, and I know, Commissioner Saltzman, that moving forward, although probably not in the next 9 months, I doubt you'll be bringing this back, but the Bureau will be willing to take another look at it as things work out. Thank you so much for your work. No.
Wheeler?
Commissioner Saltzman, thank you. One of the reasons I love being on the City Council is we don't deal with the easy stuff. We deal with the hardest stuff, and it's often thorny and complicated. We often have disagreements, but we disagree agreeably. And I know that you and the Bureau and many people have worked very, very hard on this. And I agree that the ball has been moved decisively forward. So thank you very much. And there will be other issues, as Commissioner Fritz just rightly mentioned, that we're going to have to wrestle with in the future as well. Thank you so much for your work on this. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Next item, 346, please.
Vacate portions of Northeast Weidler Street and Northeast Halsey Street, subject to certain conditions and reservations.
This is also a second reading. Colleagues, any further comments, discussion? Please call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. And colleagues, we have a 4/5 agenda item 346-1.
Recognize April 10, 2018 as Equal Pay Day.
Commissioner Saltzman.
Thank you, Mayor. Today, or actually yesterday, we observed April 10th as Equal Pay Day to raise awareness on the growing pay inequities based on gender that exist in our country. Equal Pay Day usually always lands on a Tuesday because on average, across America, a woman must work a week and 2 days to receive the same pay a man does in 1 week. Equal Pay Day is the annual calculation that establishes the extra days each year a woman must work to make as much as a man in a year. So it's generally 100 plus days past the end of the year that a woman has to work to earn the same pay that a man in a comparable job earns. And I'm unhappy to report that this year's date is a week later than last year's. So unfortunately, we have taken a step backwards as a nation, but the City of Portland has done a good job as an employer. In 2016, Council passed an ordinance that directed the Bureau of Human Resources to study pay practices at the City of Portland. These findings have found that the city's pay practices are gender neutral, and for that we can all be proud of. So I am pleased that we as a council are united in recognizing this inequality and continue to raise awareness and support efforts to address gender pay equity. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Did you want to read the proclamation?
I'll do it, or did you want to do it?
I'll go ahead and do it. Thank you. It's an honor. So, whereas Equal Pay Day was originally created by the National Committee on Pay Equity, otherwise known as NCPE, in 1996 as a public awareness event to illustrate the gap between men's and women's wages. And whereas women across the country earn, on average, 80% of what men earn for comparable work. And whereas, in the state of Oregon, women can expect to earn only 79% of what their male counterparts make. And whereas, women of color face wage discrimination at even higher rates, with African American women earning just 63% of all men's earnings, and Latinas earning just 60.4% of all men's earnings. And whereas equal pay is both a human rights and economic development issue, and studies have proven that parity in wages improves productivity potential and uplifts families and children, which benefits the entire community. And whereas the City of Portland is an equal opportunity employer and maintains a comprehensive compensation policy that pays similarly situated employees at similar rates without regard to gender or race, ethnicity. And whereas the City Council believes pay equity is a foundational component of a prosperous and successful community, and the internal actions of our local government affects the well-beings of our employees, their families, and the entire Portland community. And whereas the City Council directs the Bureau of Human Resources to evaluate existing workforce data and determine whether and how gender impacts types of appointments, pay at appointment, progression through the pay range, and promotional opportunities. Now therefore be it resolved, the Portland City Council recognizes April 10th, 2018 as Equal Pay Day and will continue to evaluate and promote equal pay policies adopted by the Council, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners Saltzman, Udaly, Fish, and Fritz.
Thank you.
Very good. Is there any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
Please call the roll.
Fish?
Well, I'm very pleased to be part of this resolution, and we obviously have a lot of work to do. I've got a 25-year-old daughter, and I hope sometime in her adult life, she, in any career of her choice, gets paid the same as her male counterparts. Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Udaly?
Well, as we know, women's pay equity has moved at a glacial pace. I think that we can expect it by 2059, if it continues at the current rate, achieving pay equity for women who make up roughly half of our workforce would significantly contribute to decrease in poverty for children, which is a great reason to strive for it. And another great reason is because it's the right thing to do. So I'm glad to say that we have pay equity on City Council, and Happy Pay Equity Day, everybody. Aye.
Fritz.
It is discouraging to see how sometimes we're taking a step backwards as on this. And it isn't only the issue of the same job disparities, it's the disparities between jobs. So I was happy to see that the resolution included our direction to the Bureau of Human Resources to look at the kinds of work that generally are done, more often done by women and more often done by men within the city government, and moving towards pay equity on that. Of course, it's also who gets the jobs, and with Commissioner Daly and I being number 7 and number 8, or the other way around, it's a matter of how open are we to encouraging women and people who identify as women in our workforce. So I have to say that as I look back over my career and reflecting that I'm now in a dead-end job that has no career advancement opportunities, at least in this particular seat, which I'm fine with. It's an honor to be here in a privileged position to do the final votes and to say the things that need to be said. I also look back on my career as a nurse and the 56 days that I spent on strike with OHSU in 2001-2002, which increased my pay by 40% in the subsequent 6 years that I worked at OHSU. And that now nursing is a career that both women and men aspire to go into, and which does pay a family wage, where you don't have to choose between looking after your patients and looking after your family or your own roof over your head. So it takes time, it takes a lot of effort, it can be very painful at times, and we have to keep trying. Aye.
Wheeler.
I really appreciate your bringing this forward, Commissioner Saltzman, and I've appreciated hearing my colleagues' statements. It is disappointing to me, Commissioner Udaley, that we are making such glacial progress on this issue. And what was coming to my mind as I was reading this, I was thinking about a letter my mom wrote. She's almost 88. She's been committing a lot of her memories to writing, which I really appreciate. She graduated from Stanford University in 1952 and took a job as a stenographer. And that was pretty much her career path, even being highly educated, and she is much, much more intelligent than I am. She's a very, very intelligent woman. And it always kind of made me wonder, you know, had she wanted to, and I don't want to make that presumption on her behalf, had those barriers not been there, how might things have been different for her? And what's in this resolution that I so much appreciate is the acknowledgement that it is not only a human rights issue that has held women back from what they deserve because they have earned it. It also holds the entire community back from an economic development and economic prosperity perspective. When women get shortchanged, our society gets shortchanged. And that's why we all have this collective interest in making sure that these issues are addressed. And I'm glad, I didn't know how that audit for the city of Portland was going to come out. And I'm glad that we're setting an example as a public institution that others in the community can follow. So thank you all. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, colleagues. I vote aye. The resolution is adopted. We are adjourned. I want to remind people that we have
the pulled item from consent.
Oh, yeah, that. Sorry, I totally forgot about that. Item 337, please read it. I've got some talking points on it.
Accept and appropriate the fiscal year 2017 Urban Areas Security Initiative grant in the amount of $2,496,835 from the Oregon Office of Emergency Management to enhance emergency preparedness through planning, training, and equipping emergency responders in the Portland urban area.
Colleagues, the City of Portland has been a recipient of so-called UASI funding since fiscal year 2003. The Department of Homeland Security has designated Portland, Oregon as the core urban area in the state of Oregon. No other cities in the state receive UASI funding. The funds will be used to enhance the region's partners, TriMet, the Port of Portland, Multnomah, Clackamas, Washington, and Columbia counties of Oregon, and Clark County, Washington, emergency preparedness through planning, training, and equipping of emergency responders. Did I get that largely right?
You did.
Nailed it. Anything
Yes.
else that people need to know about?
This is just the acceptance of a grant that you all approved for application in the last summer. So we're now accepting the funding.
Very good.
Receiving the grant.
Who pulled this item?
Lightning.
I do not see Mr. Lightning here. Please call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaly.
Well, congratulations on your successful grant application. Aye.
Fritz.
I was really delighted to see this because we were in some trepidation that we might not get this grant. So I hope this is the beginning of now getting the entitlements that we can expect from the federal government. Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, thank you, and I'm sorry I didn't realize you guys were sitting around. I apologize. We're adjourned till 2. Colleagues, I just want to remind you, we have a fair housing presentation from about 2 to 3:45 this